thank you for braving the magnificent weather. I thought there's going to be nobody there. So thanks very much for coming out. Now, abstraction in design. Now, we often have a little wine at night, and we like our wine. And we had some wine with dinner the other night, and I was about to put the bottle in the recycling. And I looked at the label of the bottle and was stunned by the beauty of the piece of abstraction that was on the label. The colours and the shapes overlapping almost like watercolours or tempera on plaster. There's my bottle of wine. And to think I was going to throw that out into the recycling. Now, works by a futurist, a symbolist, a cubist, a Dadaist, this new way of painting, objectless and abstract, this new way of seeing the world influenced the world of design and continues to today. So my wine label, the graphics on my shampoo bottle in the morning, the print on the dress and earrings that I bought last week. Abstraction is a visual legacy left to us by those artists downstairs, the stars of Paths to Abstraction. Now, abstraction permeates design, fashion, interior, architecture, industrial, graphic design, jewellery design, web design. Its influences surround us daily, and it's a visual language that we don't even question because it's become such a part of our vocabulary, and it's thanks to those guys downstairs. Now, in the 1920s, artists became involved in creating printed designs for wallpaper and textiles, and a free-spirited interchange among the arts occurred. As some of the most prominent avant-garde talents created fashion, sets and costumes, as well as designs in graphics, jewellery and interiors. And including them were painters Sonia Delaunay, Raoul Dufy, Kazimir Malevich, with Paul Klee down the road at the Bauhaus designing textiles. So fashion and costume were enriched and revolutionised by this intense and adventurous activity. And of the painters, the most active designer of textiles was Sonia Delaunay. Delaunay had a dramatic sense of colour, and her fabric designs had a very strong impact on the world of fashion and interior design. Delaunay very comfortably crossed over into the design world, and she's remembered not only as a wonderful artist, but as a very fine designer. She quickly became drawn to fashion, and when she started producing garments, they were inspired by Cubism, and she became involved in creating costumes for avant-garde theatre events. Now, in the wake of the Russian Revolution, Sonia lost her family allowance. So to earn a living, she decided to create beautiful fabrics and tapestries and carpets. And besides collaborating quite memorably with couturiers like Jacques Heim, Coco Chanel and Jean Lanvin, she made clothing for the wives of the architects of the day, Walter Gropius's wife, Marcel Breuer, Erich Mendelsohn. She even decorated a Citroën B12. What a gal. But it was a commission from the Ballet Russe in 1918 that provided her with the freedom to combine both her pattern and costume design for a single event. Delaunay was the perfect designer for ballet. Her vibrant, vivid and abstract patterns and costumes invigorated the Ballet Russe and helped to animate the new art and design world. Now, the first performance of the Ballet Russe in 1909 was an extraordinary development because it ignited excitement in fashion. And season after season, the company would amaze audiences and was a major influence on Parisian life until the death of its impresario, Sergei Diaghilev, in 1939. And the public were very excited and keen to embrace the exotic settings of the ballets, whether they were Egyptian, Cubist, or Parisian in theme. Mikhail Larinov, Matisse and Picasso also added their stamp to set designs for the Ballet Russe. Now, Delaunay never consciously separated art and design. She was extremely happy working in both media, and her artwork and design work fed off each other. Most importantly, though, she was one of the first women to hold her own in a world that was very male-dominated. And to achieve this both in the fine art world and in the design world was not only remarkable, but rare. She's held within the textile design world of today as one of the greatest designers of the 20th century and is still an inspiration to many. Now, Sonia used to say about her husband, Robert Delaunay, he gave me form, but I gave him colour. And her abstract art was influenced by the Fauvis colours. And as the couple's art grew in popularity, so too did their commissions. They designed interiors and apartments and stores. With the birth of her son Charles, Delaunay made a blanket for the newborn, and she made it from pieces of coloured fabric. And this is how she first began her work with textiles. And she called these simultaneous contrasts, and they became a great part of her work. Now, just showing you this is actually some knitwear by Longchamp in the 1920s, and Longchamp were particularly influenced by Madame Delaunay's work. There's some racy swimwear by Sonia Delaunay. She worked on book illustrations, posters and objects of art, and in the 1920s created her first dresses. Sonia's work became the standard of the new art for fabric designers of the period. So Sonia Delaunay's experiments with rectangular, spherical and square shapes were truly revolutionary. The Paris journal L'Art Vivant said of Delaunay's works, "Here reigns abstraction, constant geometry that, however it changes, is alive and raised to the heights of lightness by her inspiration, accompanied by the caprice of the play of her brush and the alluring joy of colour." How beautiful. Delaunay was without a doubt in the vanguard of the top fashion designers of the 20th century, using the achievements of her paintings in her fabric designs. A young Clarisse Cliff was one of the many who was drawn to the work of Sonia Delaunay, the Ballet Russe, the Cubists, and the De Stijl movement. Famous for her bold and bright and avant-garde pottery, Cliff became one of the most important ceramic artists of the 20th century and was deeply influenced by Delaunay's work. Her most famous work is probably this collection, her Bazaar collection, designed between 1928 and 1936. And during this time, she designed hundreds of objects which are so desired by collectors today. The patterns used abstract and geometric content and were designed in brilliant, bold, and frequently clashing colours, brilliant oranges, yellows, blues, and blacks. Susie Cooper was another significant figure in ceramic design at this time, and it was her use of bright colours and geometric banded patterns that also became her trademark, and her fascination with abstraction is evident. Demand for her stylish shapes and patterns was so great, so great. So great, so very, very great, that hand painting was supplemented with lithography and lithographic transfers, and Delaunay's references are unmistakable. Closer to home, fast forward to the designs of Linda Jackson, and her black and white disc designs pay homage to Sonia Delaunay's abstractions. Excuse me. Art has always been in a process of development. It has changed slowly, with artistic periods sometimes lasting the span of a few centuries and others being invented every year or so. And in the early part of the 20th century, the visual arts took a gigantic leap thanks to two great fathers of modern art, Georges Braque and Pablo Picasso. And in particular, it was their creation and development of Cubism that gave inspiration to such movements as Futurism, Constructivism, and De Stijl. Now, Picasso and Braque did not develop the style of Cubism independently, but each one added something new or borrowed from the other's work. Both artists were highly influenced by the work of Cézanne, who reduced objects in nature and man-made world to simple geometric elements. And his advice to artists was that one should treat nature in terms of cylinders, spheres, and cones. So Braque and Picasso took his advice to its logical conclusion, and in their work, the physical world was broken down into its smallest particles and then rearranged. Cubism was born, and it gets its name from an art critic who picked up on an observation by Matisse, who referred to Braque and Picasso's paintings as nothing but little cubes. Braque and Picasso's stylistic experiments followed a parallel course, and their works were so similar, in fact, that at a certain point they sometimes mistook each other's work for their own. Between 1908 and 1913, neither artist signed their paintings, well, at least not on the front, and they had a big game and revelled in the fact that their styles had become almost indistinguishable. Picasso and Braque's early Cubist forays were enhanced by their constant discussions. They saw each other every day. They even started to dress alike in white overalls and called each other Orville and Wilbur. A collaboration can act as a sounding board and a vote of confidence. And in the case of Picasso and Braque, dissecting the other's mind allowed them to elevate their artistic conscience to revolutionise how we relate to art and everyday objects. In fact, the Cubist thoughts of Braque and Picasso effectively set the course for art in the 20th century. Well, what an artistic dialogue between these two men. Now, Cubism has been appropriated by designers for decades. We've got here some ties I pinched out of my husband's cupboard. Emmanuel Ungaro and Giorgio Bonelli capture the colours and shapes of the true Cubist. And the designs of Claudia Chan-Shaw reference the geometric building blocks of colours in contemporary knitwear. Oh, Picasso and Braque, Braque and Picasso. I love their playfulness. They're like naughty twins who say to their mother, "It wasn't me, it was him. No, it wasn't him, it was me." They were more concerned with the ideas that they were creating rather than the egos that had created them. Now, I want you to think for a minute. Can you imagine the same collaboration and generosity happening in the design world of today, in, say, the generous world of fashion? Now, I want you to imagine a scenario. I want you to picture this conversation between John Galliano, the designer for the House of Dior, and Karl Lagerfeld, the creative director for the House of Chanel. Hello? Hello, Kaiser Karl. Yeah, John Galliano here. Yeah, House of Dior. How you doing? Yeah, John. Dior. Yeah. Do you remember that conversation we had the other night down the pub? Yeah. The one we said, we're going to have a little bit of fun with the establishment, bit of a lark, keep them all guessing. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was serious. Yeah, I was really serious. Collaboration, you and me, Galliano, Lagerfeld. Okay, now the idea is this. We both make the same dress, same colour, same shape, same everything, except you put your flower applique on the left-hand shoulder and I'll pop my flower applique on the right-hand shoulder. Just see if they're watching. Yeah, that's it. And then we make a big fuss. We get all the media excited and we get all the girls there. You invite Kylie and Poshy and Katie and Angie and Paris. No, not Paris. We want the nice girls. Yeah. The lovely girls. Yeah, and then we have a huge opening. That's it. And then they won't know which one's which. That's it. And don't forget, this is the key. You don't sew your label on the dress. You got it? Anonymous. That's it. Keep them guessing. That's it. Keep them guessing. Can you imagine that dialogue in the design world today? Can you imagine John Galliano and Karl Lagerfeld at the local pub? I don't think so. Picasso and Braque and Picasso, generosity and genius. Now, interestingly, Arne Glimcher recently directed a documentary called Picasso and Braque Go to the Movies. And this was brought out in just as recently as May. And it's produced by Martin Scorsese. And it rewrites the history of Cubism with a very convincing argument that Cubists were influenced by filmmaking and aviation when creating their works. But I digress. Coco Chanel was the incomparable, enigmatic leader of the international fashion pack in the 1920s. And in 1922, Jean Cocteau invited her to design the costumes for his production of Antigone, which had sets by Picasso. because he said she is the greatest designer of our day. Now, no one understood more than Chanel that a major shift in design concepts was happening at this time, with very strong movements towards clear lines and mass production. And she anticipated the emancipation of women and avoided designing only for the elite. Like Diaghilev, whose later ballets embraced the avant-garde, Chanel drew inspiration from modern art movements. Her designs reflected the streamlining and functionalism found in modernist architecture, constructivism, and the Bauhaus, and she often gave her suits a boxy shape, rather like simplified Cubism. Slim, graceful, elegant, and often sporty, Chanel's signature fashions were styles that could be produced easily in large quantities by post-World War I manufacturers. Now, Coco Chanel's designs reduced the silhouette of women's clothing to pure geometry of line in plain colours that drew comparison with Cubism, and particularly the movement's analytic phase with its reference to humble materials and muted colours. And she produced cylindrical, wasteless fashions echoing Cubism's interpretation of the body. She also devised the basic elements of the modern woman's wardrobe: knitwear, shorter skirts, trousers, the three-piece suit, the little black dress, and accessories to go with it. Now, when the little black dress appeared with just the simple pearls in Vogue magazine in October 1926 in the United States, it had the caption, "Here is a Ford, signed Chanel, the frock that all the world will wear." The magazine recognised the beginning of the standardisation of fashion. And even the bottle for her perfume, Chanel No. 5, which was launched in 1921, reflected the glamorous angularity of the time with its cube-shaped design made of plain, clear glass. Fashion had developed to such a state of excellence and importance that clothing was given its own pavilion in the 1925 Paris Exposition. Abstraction filtered down through garment design and found its way right through to the trimmings and the buttons. Now, the merging of fashion and abstraction found a vivid expression in the 1960s. And early in that decade, André Courrèges had already developed Piet Mondrian-like go-go boots. But Yves Saint Laurent was the first to grandly appropriate the Dutch abstractionist work. Saint Laurent designed a group of wool jersey tunic dresses with black banding and strong blocks of primary colour based on the artist's abstract paintings. And his application of these geometric shaped silhouettes to his dresses was called the Mondrian look. They were declared by Harper's Bazaar in 1965 as the dress of tomorrow. And Saint Laurent's concept of treating dresses like canvases was a phenomenon, and manufacturers made cheap copies for the mass market. Years later, Sergio Rossi interpreted Mondrian's paintings in his shoe designs of the 1980s. And Pierre Cardin played with colour and shape. But Australia's own flamboyant Florence Broadhurst, whose wallpaper designs adorned the walls around the globe during the 1960s and 70s, was hugely influenced by abstraction. While she's known for her psychedelic geometrics, her peacocks, and her shiny metallic finishes, the work of Sonia Delaunay, again, is referenced. Cubist elements and simplified still lives reflect the paintings of Cézanne, Picasso, and Braque. And at age 60, Florence Broadhurst declared that Australia was afraid of colour and launched her company, which supplied amazingly coloured hand-printed silkscreen wallpapers and textiles. And her firm was a leader in Australia and the UK for 20 years. And then after a hiatus of 30 years, obviously with the poor lady's death, in 2000, the designs reappeared and a wallpaper renaissance has been going on ever since. Ettore Sottsass was the driving force behind the Memphis movement, which was created in Italy in 1981. And the movement only lasted 6 years, but it was recognised for its very playful style and the creation of whimsical furniture, lighting, objects, tableware, rugs. Memphis was a reaction against the black box concept of design from the 1970s, and it had a sense of humour that was lacking in design at that time. Now, the Memphis group offered bright, colourful, shocking pieces, often made from plastic laminated wood, and the colours they used contrasted against the dark browns and blacks of European furniture. Now, why the name Memphis? The designers had gathered one night, creating this magnificent manifesto, and there was a Bob Dylan record playing in the background, and the record kept getting stuck on one track, and that track was "Stuck Inside of Mobile with the Memphis Blues Again," and the name Memphis stuck as well. Now, the Memphis designers drew inspiration from Art Deco and pop art, but for me, the influence is Malevich all over. Floating rectangles, triangles, circles and squares, moving in space, Memphis imagery makes Malevich go pop. Now, American designers also picked up on the Memphis look, but in much more muted colours, because the Americans were much more conservative than the Italian founders of the movement. The patterns in textiles here are more than a nod to the abstract paintings of Sophie Taeuber-Arp. And interestingly, Tauber's grid-based designs were an evolution from her concepts for embroidery and weaving. Now, throughout the 20th century, art has frequently entered the world of fashion. Sonia Delaunay's fashion designs incorporated the colour contrast that made her paintings so great. Giacomo Balla featured irregular shapes and clashing colours in his futurist suit from 1914. And Gianni Versace visited futurist ideas in his collection in 1989-1990. Now, the relationship between art and fashion can become more complex when fashion designers become aware of how creative values can go beyond just the simple imitation of art. And except for the materials used, the work of Japanese designer Issey Miyake can be compared to that of an architect or a sculptor, and he does not cut and stitch his fabrics according to the contours of the body, but gives them an independent structure. Miyake turns his materials into soft, spiralling shapes that recall the work of the geometric abstractionists. And we see abstraction influencing contemporary architecture. Famous for the glass pyramid at the Louvre in Paris, I.M. Pei's style is thoroughly modernist with Cubist themes, and he's known for combining traditional architecture with progressive designs based on simple geometric patterns. Or take the extraordinary geometric abstractions found in architect Denis Laming's futuristic designs for the Kinemax Futuroscope theme park in France, with a little help from Thierry Mugler. Closer to home, Rose Seidler House, built between 1948 and 1950, one of the most uncompromising modernist houses in Australia, and its original furniture is one of the most important post-war design collections in Australia. Harry Seidler built the house for his mum, Rose, and dad, Max, who lived there until 1967, and the Bauhaus suddenly stepped into suburban Sydney. The Guggenheim Museum at Bilbao, designed by Canadian-American Frank Gehry, is one of the most admired works of contemporary architecture, and the composition and curvaceous freeform sculptural style is very much Gehry's signature. The curves on the building were designed to appear random, and when it opened to the public in 1997, it was immediately hailed as one of the world's most spectacular buildings in the style of Deconstructivism. And another major current in deconstructivist architecture takes inspiration from the Russian constructivist and futurist movements, both in their graphics and their visionary architecture. Artists Lissitzky, Malevich, and Rodchenko have influenced the graphic sense and geometric forms of deconstructive architect Zaha Hadid. Hadid is the most prominent contemporary female architect in the world, and the only woman architect to have won the prestigious award, the Pritzker Prize. While still a student, Hadid's final graduation project was entitled Malevich's Tectonic, and in her work, Hadid was particularly influenced by Malevich's writing, which stated, "We can only perceive space when we break free from the earth, where the point of support disappears." Hadid shatters the classically formal, rule-bound modernism of Van der Rohe and Le Corbusier and the old rules of space about walls and ceilings and right angles, and she then reassembles them with multiple perspective points and fragmented geometry designed to embody the chaotic fluidity of modern life. Now, with some designs resembling spaceships and an H.G. Wellian image of the future, she's created sublimely beautiful shapes that have translated to furniture design, shoe design for Lacoste, and Cubist-inspired jewellery. We recently created a collection of rugs under the Vivian Chan-Shaw label for designer rugs, and the design process was really enjoyable because it's quite different designing something with a boundary rather than a frock. And the challenge for us was to try and translate the sense of movement and flow that we feature in our knitwear into rug designs. Now, it's quite amazing when we looked at the final result because we did not intentionally intend to be influenced by Kandinsky or the suggestion of movement from the futurists like Bala. But as designers, we can only help be influenced by the greatness that has gone before us. We're driven by colour, by line, by shape and form, and we constantly refer to the visual language that is abstraction. Its influences permeate our psyches and bubble to the surface when we least expect it. Now, when people look at my double-barrel surname, I'm asked about my family background. Ooh, what's the Chan bit? And what's the Shaw bit? And ooh, that's very exotic. And can I speak another language? Well, I can answer that question speaking for all designers because we are all multilingual. Designers see the world quite differently, and that is because designers speak the language of abstraction. Thank you.